Well, I said some people grow up knowing exactly how to discuss things, almost like it's second nature, while others grow up learning to hold back instead of speaking out. French, Jewish, and American intellectual traditions treat discussion almost like oxygen. It's natural, it's encouraged, it's woven into daily life. What about Chinese culture? Many of us tend to choose silence, observation, and harmony, especially in public settings. So, what happens when you're Chinese living in the UK and learning French at the same time like me? Well, things get interesting, a little bit chaotic, and honestly filled with beautiful discoveries. Hey guys, welcome back to Rachel Hongkonger. If you're new here, I'm someone shaped by 3 communication cultures. I grew up in Hong Kong speaking 4 languages, I now live in the UK and I'm learning French. And somehow this combination is making me re-understand parts of my Chinese roots and even my British life in a way I've never expected. If you're someone who's curious about culture, communication and identity, or you are a francophile like me, you'll probably enjoy this channel. We'll explore all these ideas together. Some people discuss openly, some stay quiet, some will feel their opinions only in private, and some politely pretend to agree while internally disagreeing. Welcome to France, Hong Kong and the UK. Today I want to talk about something that's been on my mind for a really long time. You know how certain cultures are just really comfortable discussing things. Not arguing, not fighting, not trying to win, just exploring ideas together. The Jewish intellectual tradition is one example, a culture built on questioning, debating, and sharpening ideas. I once saw a video from a YouTube channel called Nas Daily, in where he said, "I studied Judaism for 1 month, now I love to argue.
And now I understand why 22% of Nobel Prizes go to Jews." Does anybody here get offended by somebody disagreeing with you and telling you you're wrong?
The goal is
On the same team all the time.
No, you get
On the same team.
You get excited. The goal is mutual understanding.
It's really interesting and it captured me because what he meant wasn't conflict, he meant discussion as a tool for thinking. The French are another obvious example. Debate is part of their everyday rhythm. Dinner table, cafe, classrooms, and Americans too, traditionally shaped by open discussion, free speech, and campus culture. Things feel more polarized today, but the foundation still exists. And I love that. I love the energy of open discussion. But I didn't grow up with it. I grew up in Chinese culture. I live in the UK now and I'm learning French. And these 3 worlds communicate in very different ways. All of this made me notice how people respond to the question, "So, what do you think?" My awareness began in the most ordinary place, a university classroom in Hong Kong. It was the first session of Theme 101. Look, I still keep the reference book that we used in the class. There were 8 of us, 7 from Hong Kong and mainland China, and 1 exchange student from France. We watched a short film and the professor asked, "Alright, let's discuss. What do you think?" And the silence that followed was something else. You know, that silence when everyone suddenly finds their notes really interesting. Eventually, the French exchange student spoke up. He shared his thought clearly. Then he turned to us and asked, "And you, what do you think?" And again, silence. Can you believe that? He looked absolutely puzzled. And we looked really uncomfortable, to be honest. I knew the professor was really frustrated as well. But here's the truth. We were not silenced because we lacked opinions. We were silenced because many of us grew up fearing the idea of being wrong and of embarrassing ourselves publicly. We would rather make it all silence than embarrass ourselves. That's actually quite ridiculous. And that moment never left me. It showed me that communication isn't just about language, it's about culture, it's about comfort and what feels safe. And if you never study or work with people from different culture, you've probably seen this dynamic too, right? You would not imagine that I was actually one of the quiet ones. So this isn't a criticism of anyone, it's simply a moment that shows how differently our voice develops. Some cultures encourage speaking up, some encourage observing. Neither is wrong. Both are shaped by history, family, education, and expectations, all of it. When I started researching for this interesting interesting topic that has been stuck in my mind for over a decade, I discovered that the French culture is one built on speaking up. French has a long tradition of valuing ideas, not just privately but out loud. And yes, we often talk about Descartes, Rousseau, Voltaire, but there's one line that captures the French mindset perfectly. Je pense donc je suis. In Cantonese we say 我思故我在. This is a very famous one. I bet most of you have heard about this before. It reflects a culture where your thoughts and opinions matter, and expressing them is part of identity. For centuries, Parisian cafes were not just cafes.
The atmosphere of Paris is best enjoyed in a cafe, where one can just spend hours on end watching the world go by. On the left bank of the River Seine, in the heart of the Latin Quarter, there is the oldest cafe in Paris, where artists, writers, philosophers, and politicians have congregated for centuries, creating and sharing ideas that transform the world.
There were informal debating spaces where people discuss politics, society, morality, basically everything. This is why discussing or debating isn't rude in France, it's cultural. And you can still see everywhere today, like in protests where are a form of public participation, in dinner conversations that turn philosophical without warning, in TV panels where disagreement is normal and not personal. Of course, not every French person debates passionately because individuals vary, but the cultural comfort with expressing ideas is real, and that's why the French exchange student in my class spoke so naturally. Like, for him, speaking up was simply normal. But for me, growing up where silence often feels safer, the French approach felt new but also inspiring to me. So after I got over the shock of how comfortable French people are with speaking up, I couldn't stop wondering, where did this come from? Because honestly, it can't just be personality. There's something deeper going on, right? You don't get a whole country of people who enjoy discussing things unless something has shaped them that way. And the more I looked into it, the more things clicked. There's this long tradition of valuing ideas, real, substantial ideas, the kind you sit with, think about and discuss. And this didn't start yesterday. It goes all the way back to the Enlightenment. I'm not going to turn this into a history lecture, but if you've ever walked through Paris and felt like every cafe has opinions floating around in the air, that's kind of where that feeling comes from. People like Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, these were not just writers. They were like the original podcaster of Europe, except instead of the YouTube comments, they had salons and coffee houses where people debated everything. Religion, society, morality, like what is freedom? Should kings exist? Why do humans behave the way they do? That spirit didn't end when history moved on. When the French Revolution happened, it wasn't only people on the streets. It was people writing pamphlets, giving speeches, meeting in cafes, arguing in salons. Almost like the country was having a giant group debate about how society should work. Whether you agree with them or not, you can't deny it created a culture where talking things out become part of everyday life. And here's the interesting part. This energy eventually slips into the education system. If you ever met a French teenager, you know exactly what I mean. They can disagree with a teacher politely but firmly, and the teacher will challenge them back. It's never happened in Chinese culture. I remember the first time I saw a clip of a French bac philo exam.
Now, the philosophy exam is traditionally the first exam to kick off the whole series, and the whole country tunes in for those questions.
Yeah, the media really relays the questions. People discuss them among themselves. Let's check out some examples from the 2019 bac. So here are some questions that students got. Is it possible to escape time? What's the use of explaining a work of art? And this one I love. Does acknowledging your duties mean foregoing your freedom? So pretty deep stuff for these philosophy students. Now,
16 years old writing essays on questions like, do we own our own thoughts? Or is happiness a right? Meanwhile, at 16, I was probably still trying to figure out why my hair parting never looks symmetrical. And then there is a legendary French essay structure: thèse, antithèse, Synthesis is basically the academic version of, okay, hear me out, but now let's flip it. And now let's bring it all together again. It forces you to look at an idea from every single angle, even the angle you don't personally like. And I honestly admire that so much, because in a world full of fast opinions, being trained to pause and think is rare. The more I learned about the system and about how early French students start practicing this, the more I realized, oh, this is why debating feels so natural for them. It's not arrogance, it's not showing off, it's training, it's a habit, and it's culture. It's like learning to ride a bike. When you start young, you don't even think about the mechanic anymore. And the interesting thing is, once I understood all that, I stopped feeling intimidated when French people jumped into debates with me, because suddenly I realized, oh, they were raised in this. This is home territory for them. And to be honest, I kind of wish I learned this earlier too. Especially now when AI is everywhere, fake news spreads faster than facts, and everyone has an opinion before anyone has time to think. Being trained to ask good questions, that feels more important than ever. And in a way, the French system is like a lifelong workout for your curiosity muscles. The more time I spent in France in the last few years when traveling, also especially when I was an exchange student in Toulouse, the more I realized something that honestly changed how I understand communication. In France, disagreement isn't automatically seen as conflict. It's often seen as engagement. There's an actual term for this in French sociolinguistics, confrontation positive. There was a prominent French linguist and emeritus professor who is called Catherine, sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce the surname, writes about how challenging someone's idea can be a sign that you are participating, not attacking. And I really saw this in everyday life. People would discuss things with so much energy. Interruptions, strong reaction, overlapping opinions. And then, once the topic was done, everyone just carry on. No tension, no awkwardness, just normal conversation. At first, I didn't know how to read it, but then it clicked. For many French people, expressing disagreement is part of their conversation, not something that damages the relationship. It's a way of saying, I'm involved, I'm listening, I'm thinking with you. When I contrasted this with how I grew up, I understood why it initially felt unfamiliar. In Chinese communications, so much comes from Confucian thinking, where harmony, and we say 和, forms the basics of good relationship. Public disagreement can easily feel like disrespect, loss of face, or disrupting unity. So sometimes silence is a form of care, a softer tone is a form of respect, and avoiding open disagreement is a way of protecting the relationship. It doesn't mean we never debate, we absolutely do, but usually with trusted people in private spaces where the emotional environment feels safe. And then you have the UK, which in my experience sits somewhere in between the two, which to be honest, I quite like it. British communication tends to soften disagreement, wrap it in politeness, and deliver it gently. People will say things like, I see what you mean, but... or I'm not entirely convinced, or would there be another way to look at it? Is disagreement just delivered more diplomatically? So across these three communication cultures, connection carries different emotional meanings. Like in French culture, connection comes from engagement. In Chinese culture, connection comes from harmony. And in British culture, connection comes from balancing honesty with politeness. And once I understood this, I stopped trying to fit everything into one definition. I realized that every culture has its own emotional logic, its own strengths, and its own kind of wisdom. And instead of choosing one, I started to appreciate all three. And all of this, seeing how different cultures handle ideas, disagreement, and connection, made me think about something much bigger than just debate styles. It made me look at the world we live in today and ask whether these communication strengths are being lost, reshaped, or maybe even needed more than ever. Because even in cultures that were traditionally known for strong discussion like France, the US, and Europe, things feel different now. We're living in a world where AI generates endless content, deepfakes look real, misinformation spreads quickly, algorithms trap us, outrage gets more attention than nuance, and the most obvious one is that being honest online can feel risky. And when I say honest, I don't mean the enormous people online who say harsh things just to stir anger. That's not honesty, that's noise. It doesn't help a conversation grow, it just spreads negativity. What I'm talking about is the kind of honesty that genuinely contributes to a discussion, the kind where you're trying to add perspective, not pick a fight. But these days, even that kind of honest thought comes with pressure. If you don't choose a side instantly, some people assume you're supporting the opposite side, nuance becomes suspicious, thoughtfulness becomes hesitation, and that makes people shut down. French education system literally teaches teenagers to explore both sides, the test and the anti-test, before forming a conclusion. A coin always has two sides, but online it sometimes feels like you are only allowed to show one. And I think that's one of the reasons so many people stay silent now. Not because they don't care, but because they don't want to be attacked, misunderstood, or disliked for having a thought that doesn't fit perfectly into one social media approved direction. So they stop contributing, not out of harmony, but out of fear. And somewhere in all this noise, the art of thoughtful, respectful conversations seems to be shrinking. We react faster than we reflect. We share before we verify, and we disagree before we understand. And that worries me, because if French communication taught me anything, it's that discussing ideas can bring people closer. Chinese communication taught me that harmony protects relationship, while British communication taught me that diplomacy makes room for everyone. And the more I think about it, the more I believe we don't need to choose just one style. We can learn from all three cultures and build a communication identity that feels true to who we are. I really love the Chinese idea of 大同. People often translate it as a world of shared harmony, or a world where we learn from each other instead of staying trapped in our own boxes. And honestly, that feels like the direction our world needs right now. Less separation, more learning. So before we wrap up, I genuinely want to ask you, do you feel that the art of good discussion is disappearing, or is it simply evolving into something new? And which communication tools from the cultures you've experienced do you want to bring into your future self? Tell me in a comment. I'm really looking forward to reading your thoughts. And if you want to explore this topic more deeply, I actually made a video earlier called Why I Fell in Love with French Culture and What You Learn from It. It connects beautifully with today's conversation, so feel free to watch that one next. I think you'll enjoy it.